Thursday morning, Birds fans. The countdown is definitely on. We are into single-digit days before the first Philadelphia Eagles game of the 2023 season. We're here to talk a little bit more about the roster building that took some turns yesterday with the addition of practice squad guys. And Johnny Mack can attribute to some of them directly because he saw them out there practicing with the Eagles yesterday. Yeah. Pretty much official. None of the guys on a practice squad if he's out practicing with the Eagles on a given day. J-Mac, at least 13 of the 16 roster spots for the practice squad have been filled. The report out there that another will be filled by a player the Eagles will bring in from another organization. When I was going through the list, no great surprises. Any for you?
No, I think, if you talk about the people that went elsewhere, I talked about Kayvon Wallace a lot. He got claimed by Arizona and Jonathan Gannon. So, and I don't think he would have been back anyway if he wasn't claimed, because I had heard he had some significant interest and probably wanted a fresh start elsewhere. Tyree Jackson, I don't know. He signed with the Giants practice squad. The Eagles did sign Brady Russell, brought him back to the practice squad. I could have seen them offering a spot for Tyree again on the practice squad, but that's another one where I said beforehand, I said, that's probably a guy who needs a change of scenery, probably. And I don't know if that's how he framed it, how he saw it, but I think that makes sense for him to try to get that restart, reboot, whatever you want to call it, somewhere else. And Josh Schiltz got claimed by Indianapolis and Shane Steichen because they know him. And that's a guy I think that would have been back on the practice squad had he not been claimed. I don't think there's any question about that. So that's the one guy. And they brought back Julian Good-Jones, and they brought back Brett Toth. Was one of them behind Sills? Probably. One of them probably wouldn't have been back. But I think it's good they were able to get Toth back because of his versatility, and Julian Good-Jones can play a little bit of center, so he's got some versatility as well. So no earth-shattering surprises. They got 13 guys back and 24 waiver claims, Jody. So for all the hysterics, all the 24 waiver claims across the NFL, 11 teams claim players. Arizona claimed 6. So if you take them out of the mix, that's 18 and 10 teams. It is so overrated. And I guarantee you, Jody, we'll be here next year, hopefully, God willing. People are going to do the same thing. It's like they forget every year. It's not that big of a
expose
thing.
him. He's going to get grabbed. You Eagles have to take him on a 53. You can't expose him. He's going to be claimed.
24
at least they did get 2 guys claimed. And here's the other thing you got to remember for next year, 365 days from now. Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen won't be first-year coaches in their new place that are looking to pilfer guys that they're familiar with the Eagles, because that's who the Eagles lost their 2 players to. 2 former coaches who said, well, I just coach this guy. He's pretty damn good. Let's go. He's better than what we got. That won't even be the case next year, unless, of course, you think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl and lose 1 or 2 or more of their coordinators again next year, which is not impossible.
Yeah, Brian Johnson could be a one-and-done guy, especially if the Eagles continue to be successful. Him especially. Nothing against Sean Desai, but he probably will need to prove it a little bit longer, but we shall see. And it's harder for defensive guys overall than offensive guys. So, but obviously the strength of the Eagles is on the offensive side of the football. Yeah, I mean, it's just, my whole thought process, and again, nobody will ever be able to prove it because the big discussion was the 3 defensive backs. And my overall prediction was they're going to have all 3 back. It's just a matter of how they do it and who's on the roster and who's on the practice squad. Now, you never know. I mean, I brought up Josh Blackwell last year. If you would have, he was getting claimed, I would have laughed at you. So, I mean, you never know what these organizations are thinking. So everything's a calculated gamble, but ultimately, and the three players I'm talking about are Eli Ricks, Mario Goodrich, and Mekhi Gardner, and they got all three. They kept all three. It's just a matter of how you manipulate and how he was able to keep all three. So at the end of the day, it's successful.
Understood. But if you still have doubts about whether Rick should have been the guy or Garner should have been the guy and who earned it, well, the Eagles still,
It
right,
doesn't
because they're
matter.
all on the roster, can decide
Yeah,
that as they
exactly.
go. And they
that
are
was my
so
ultimate. Yeah, doesn't matter. Ultimately, doesn't matter.
good.
And now they have all three, and it'll raise, and it'll eventually work itself out in the end.
It matters
they
to
have
Eli
all three.
Rick because he's getting compensated more for being on the regular roster than Gardner is.
Well,
For being on
I'm
the
not
practice
talking
squad.
about from a personal level. I'm talking about from a fan level. They have, it's conceivable, as I said, it's conceivable because of special teams we talked about. On week one in New England, it's conceivable that Ricks and Goodrich aren't active and Gardner is, simply because of special teams.
Yeah, I would doubt that because the two guys, if everybody's going to be elevated, and you could only elevate two practice squad guys
We got to
on any
elevate
given
punter.
day, is the punter and the punt returner. So I don't think Mr. Gardner's going to be making it for special teams because you can only elevate two, and you can
No,
only do it
but
three
it's
times.
not done. There's a lot of speculation, and I know fans are hoping. Again, it's not done until Tuesday. I would say Tuesday before the Wednesday practice of next week. There's a lot of talk the Eagles are going to look at punters and potentially sign a punter, and if that comes to fruition, so there's a lot of dominoes still to fall. Obviously, if they don't sign an outside punter, yeah, then they got to elevate Aaron Cepas. They could also say, Alameda can do it for a week. Justin Evans can do it for a week. There's a lot of ways they can go. I'm just throwing out possibilities, but ultimately, and Howie was very clear on this, it's not 53, it's 69. He said it a couple times, and the Eagles believe that, and they decided to keep a group that they thought had, there's, as I said yesterday, there's no question that they thought Ricks was more susceptible to be claimed than, and even Goodrich, than Gardner. And that's why they did what they did. But ultimately, they got all three back, which I thought would happen.
Right. But do you think that they would, if they had to make a choice between elevating a punt returner and elevating a coverage guy like Garner, you think they choose a coverage guy over an actual punt returner? You think they
No,
go
not
with
right now. Not right now. But I'm saying if they sign a punter, right, that takes punter off the equation. Then you could elevate a punt returner and a coverage player. So there's still, if you ask me right now, they have to elevate a punter. Have to. They don't have a punter, so that's 100%. But if they sign Braden Mann or somebody like that, well, no. I mean, that's out. Then they're not going to elevate a punter, and then it changes things. As far as punt returner, I think there's at least a chance that they let Alameda do it, or even Justin Evans. Lesser for Justin Evans because I think he's going to have a big impact on defense. But I think there's at least a chance they let Alameda do it. And when I asked Howie about special teams, he said, we're going to make sure Michael Clay's comfortable. Well, if he's telling the truth, and he might not be telling the truth, if he's telling the truth, then he's going to elevate somebody on game day. I don't know who that is. It might be Van Sumeren, but he's going to elevate somebody to make Michael Clay more comfortable. Now, if he's just talking out the left side, I always say, you know what I say, Jody, nobody's under oath in these press conferences.
right.
He might be just blowing smoke up the what, but if he's telling the truth, he's got to elevate somebody to help Michael Clay feel comfortable.
All right. First tricky question roster-wise for the year, since you're suggesting there's a chance. Not saying it's happening. You're just saying there's a chance that the Eagles are going to get another punter. And if they do so, they will be putting him on the 53, not signing a punter to the practice squad and then decide, do we keep that? Well, they could put him on the practice squad
They
and
could,
just
yeah,
cut
they could do that too. They could do that too. They could sign Braden Mann to the practice squad, cut Ceebus. There's a lot of things they can still do. It's not going to be, but when they get to Wednesday of next week, it's going to be, you're going to know, what the 53 is and what they're going to, you're not going to know 100%, but you're going to get a good feeling on who they have to elevate. Obviously, if they don't have a punter on the roster, they have to elevate a punter.
Right. They got to either sign him to the roster or have him on the practice squad. And then after 3 elevations, you got to make a call anyway. Who of the men on the 53-man roster, I guess is the way I should ask the question, who's number 53? Who is the most likely guy if they want a Braden Mann and he says, well, I got other teams that I'm talking to that are going to sign me straight to the roster. Why would I go to the Eagles practice squad when I can be the punter in another town? I'd prefer the Eagles, but if you're just offering a practice squad, I'll see you in week whatever if the Eagles play that team this year. Who's the guy most likely to get cut if they need to add someone from outside the organization?
Well, I think the 53rd guy on the roster, and I don't think he's the 53rd player from a performance standpoint, but I think the 53rd guy on the roster is Grant Calcaterra, because I don't think you need 4 tight ends.
Yeah, but you only got 4 wide receivers.
Yeah, I know. And I was told to watch wide receiver on the waiver wire for the Eagles. The Eagles weren't awarded any claims, but I can say definitively that they did not claim a wide receiver. And the reason I can say that is there were no wide receivers claimed.
None.
So
there was 0 wide receivers claimed out of the 24, 0 wide receivers.
And let me double check that, but I meant to make a note of it, and I recall scanning it and didn't see a receiver.
I looked at the list. I'm not remembering a wide receiver off the top of my head.
So I'm going down it right now as we speak. There's only 24, so it shouldn't take long. No, 0 wide receivers were claimed. Right. So definitively, they did not claim a receiver. Now they brought back Devin Allen, they brought back Britton Covey, they brought back Greg Ward,
and Nada,
and Joseph Nada.
So they do have 4
wide receivers, a lot of bodies on the practice squad.
Exactly.
If any of those guys had to play, you're probably not in a good position from receiver. I think Britton's fine as a punt returner, but as a receiver, if you have to play any of those 4, I think Greg Ward would be the best option. And we know Greg Ward. We know what he can do and what he can't do.
Right. But my question to you is, because they are a little short at wide receiver and on game day, they're not going to elevate anybody on game day. So they're going to have to make a decision if they're going to add a wide receiver. They got the elevations, again, only 2 per week and only 3. And then you got to add a guy to the roster. I would think Contavious Street has got to be more sitting on eggshells than Grant Calcaterra, because if Contavious Street is let go, so what? They're down to 6 defensive tackles, which is probably more than you need.
That's not a bad thought as well, because hey, I'm the first to say, I get their thought process of wanting to keep the best players, especially with the changes with the practice squad, allowing veterans on the practice squad, the more liberal IR rules. But I mean, how deep do you have to be? I mean, at some point, I mean, what has to go wrong for Contavious Street to play? A lot. So ultimately, while he's a good player, he's an NFL player. He's here for 1 year. He's signed for. I mean, what is the point other than, I guess, sleeping a little bit more soundly at night? Now, who knows? They might move a Jomo to injured reserve. That they could still do that kind of stuff. But he was back at practice, so I think it's going to be more difficult to do it now. because again, it's a little bit, you know, you have to have documentation. I always say back in the old days, you just say, oh, so-and-so sprained an ankle. We're going to put him on injured reserve and stash him like George Allen. You can't do that now. You have to have documentation. So that ship may have sailed, but hey, we always see these. Don't be surprised if somebody sprains an ankle in practice, Jody. Um, and because it's only 4 games. So you have that avenue as well. But yeah, Contavious could be the guy because they're not going to cut Moro Ajomo because of the ceiling, and they have him obviously under team control for 4 years. And Contavious Street, as I said, is a 1-year guy.
And one other guy who I was a little surprised with, I thought he was going to be on the practice squad. As we said, it's going to be all Eagle guys that were cut that come back, except for the cornerback that Tim McManus was reporting from, who was it, Denver, that they picked up?
Chargers, I think.
Chargers, right. Name. I knew it was somebody in the AFC West. But that has not been made official yet, right?
No, not been made official. Probably will be today, but not definitively. But expect that. So that'll be 14th, and they still have 2 more open spots,
right? Which is smart to give themselves some flexibility.
That so
that I think that's the way to play it. The Eagles have played that well. I thought for sure. Now, as far as I know, he hasn't signed with any practice squad. I'm sure his agent is talking to other teams. I thought Nicholas Morrow was coming back with only 3 linebackers. The fact that they signed him with no bonus money whatsoever kind of tips the hand that the rest of the league isn't as high as Nicholas Morrow. Wasn't like he had an unbelievable preseason, put something on tape, and the team was, well, we got to get him. Kind of like the Eagles picking up Albert O. Damn, got 100 yards in a preseason game. Let's go out and get that guy. Nicholas Morrow didn't do that with his preseason here in Philadelphia. They didn't bring him back. They're still woefully short at the linebacker position as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Do you think that's still a possibility, John, that they will talk to him and fill one of those 2 openings still with another linebacker?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I mentioned it yesterday on the show. Nick's the kind of guy who's probably going to wait a little bit and look around and see if there's another, maybe a better opportunity out there, and maybe you circle back, and he is back eventually. You're saying something that happened with Anthony Harris, if you remember. When he got cut after the Eagles
how long
traded.
Did he wait? When did the Eagles re-sign him?
He was back and forth. He agreed, waited a couple days, and agreed to come back to the practice squad. But then Denver stepped in and signed him. He had a relationship with George Payton from Minnesota, and he went there, and then he came back. So he was back and forth all year. But he was a guy who was, he was going to be a starter on August 29th, and all of a sudden he's off the roster, and he's like, all right, I'll come back. And then you got, George Patton came in, and he went elsewhere, and ultimately came back, as I said. So I think a similar thing's going on with Nicholas Morrow. You wait and see. You still have a little bit of time. As I said, Tuesday of next week is the big day. You want to have everything settled by then, so everybody's in line for your plan for New England on Wednesday for practice. So there's still some time, and you're going to see some moves around the league. And obviously here, because the Eagles have those 3 spots, and we know one of them. But still some time.